So, 1 Samuel starts with Hannah, who is barren. She can't have children. She's going through a hard time, a struggle, and she comes to the Lord and just pours her heart out. It says she pours her anguish out, her bitterness out to the Lord. And before he actually answers her, she starts to praise him. And her circumstances hadn't changed, but she's able to worship. And in chapter 2, she starts calling out all these attributes of God in her prayer, that he is holy. There's no one like him. He is our rock. He's a God of knowledge. He brings to life. He holds the pillars of the earth. And this is before he's even given her a yes to her prayer. And we know that he does answer her prayer with a yes. He gives her a son in Samuel. And then we get to see, we're introduced to Eli's sons. Eli's the high priest, and his sons are worthless men. They're sinful. And then we get to see God's call on Samuel's life and his answer. When he answers in chapter 3, "Speak, for your servant hears, Lord." In chapter 2, we got one of the key verses for the entire book. It says, "Those who honor me, I will honor. Those who despise me shall be lightly esteemed." We're going to see that play out over and over in the book. And we continue to see that Samuel is viewed as righteous in comparison to Eli's sons, who are not righteous. And the man comes to Eli and he gives him a warning, and then the vision comes, or the Lord speaks to Samuel, and he in turn gives Eli the same warning, that his sons are going to die on the same day. And then we know in chapter 4 that comes to fruition. His sons are killed in battle. The ark is stolen or taken by the Philistines. And then Eli falls over dead. And so Israel's in this position where they don't have the ark, which was a sign of the presence of the Lord with them. It was needed for the Day of Atonement. Their high priest has died, and his sons, who would have succeeded him as high priest, has died. And Samuel's still young at this time, and he's not mentioned here in chapter 5 or 6. And the ark is making its way around Philistine territory. And at the end of chapter 4, they say the glory has departed from Israel. And then we get to chapter 5, and we see that God's glory was still there. He's going to be glorified. They take the ark and they put it in the temple of Dagon, their primary god. And what happens? They come in, and Dagon is on his face. He's fallen over. They pick him up. They put him back up, and the next morning they come back in, and he's fallen again, and his head is off, and his hands are off. And they're kind of wondering, like, how did that happen? What is this? And then they start to get hit with all these plagues and tumors and apparently rats. And so they start to take the ark around, trying to, maybe if we move it from city to city, it'll go away. And it says at the end of chapter 5, the hand of God was very heavy there, and a cry went up from the city. And so they're trying to devise a plan here as we get into chapter 6. How can we get rid of this ark? At first, we saw it as a trophy of war that we had won, and now it's become a burden to us. And we've seen God, his hand be against us, and he's pouring out his judgment on us. So they're trying to figure out, how can we get rid of this thing without having to do it ourselves and admit that maybe we were wrong and that he is greater than, that God of Israel is greater than our gods. So they're trying to figure out a way to save face. And let's read chapter 6, verses 1 through 9. "The ark of the Lord was in the country of the Philistines 7 months. And the Philistines called for the priests and the diviners and said, 'What shall we do with the ark of the Lord? Tell us, with what shall we send it to its place?' They said, 'If you send away the ark of the God of Israel, do not send it empty, but by all means return him a guilt offering. Then you will be healed, and it will be known to you why his hand does not turn away from you.' And they said, 'What is the guilt offering that we shall return to him?' They answered, 5 golden tumors and 5 golden mice, according to the number of the lords of the Philistines. From the same plague was on all of you and on your lords.' So you must make images of your tumors and images of your mice that ravage the land, and give glory to the God of Israel. Perhaps he will lighten his hand from off of you and your gods in your land. Why should you harden your hearts as the Egyptians and Pharaoh hardened their hearts? After he had dealt severely with them, did they not send the people away and they departed? Now then, take and prepare a new cart and 2 milk cows on which there has never come a yoke, and yoke the cows to the cart, and take their calves home away from them. And take the ark of the Lord and place it on the cart, and put in a box at its side the figures of gold, which you are returning to him as a guilt offering. Then send it off and let it go on its way, and watch. If it goes up on the way to its own land, to Beth Shemesh, then it is he who has done us this great harm. But if not, then we shall know that it is not his hand that has struck us. It happened to us by coincidence. So they decide to devise this plan for how we can get rid of the ark. And throughout this plan, there's a theme here that we're going to see play out, and it's a theme of God's sovereignty and God's holiness, and that God takes his holiness seriously. So it tells us in verse 1, it's been there for 7 months. So they brought it over, and within 7 months, they've passed it from city to city, and each city has been hit with tumors. There's been death there, and there seems like it may be a shortage of crops there as well. It says the rats or the mice are destroying our land. So for 7 months, and then they go and they're going to devise a test. Okay, why is this happening to us? Is it coincidence? Is it chance? Now we know there's nothing left up to chance. God is in control over everything. He doesn't leave anything to chance. He has a purpose in it all. He either allows or his hand is directly involved in all of it. So they devise this test and say, okay, is the God of Israel really the true and living God? And so if he is, we're gonna put this in play, and it'll kind of take any responsibility off of us, and we can just say, look, it was him, and the God of the Israelites brought the ark back to him. And it says they call on their holy men, the priests and diviners. And so there is a spiritual aspect at play here. Like these are not just guys who they go to for advice. I think of when the Israelites were in Egypt, and Moses and Aaron go in, and Aaron throws his staff down and it turns into a snake. And then what did the magicians in Egypt do? They threw their staff down and it turned into a snake too. That was not like a play on words. That's something that actually happened. And so there's a spiritual aspect at play here, that these really are people who are getting some sort of either demonic influence, or there's something here that's spiritual. And they come up with this advice: don't send it back empty. Okay? So they're saying you need to appease the God that you've offended. And that was common for them to send a guilt offering if they felt like they had offended a God of some sort. Okay? And so even in these diviners and these priests who are coming up with this plan, God is in control. Like, they're devising this plan and stacking the odds against it actually happening. And God's in control the whole time, allowing them to, okay, you come up with your plan, and you come up with a new cart and cows who have never been yoked and all these things. But in reality, you're doing exactly what I want you to do, because I'm going to be honored. I've already shown you that here by sending the plagues. And now it's time for the ark to go back to my people. And so they send this guilt offering, and of 5 gold tumors and 5 golden mice. Now in chapter 5, we weren't told anything about mice or the issue here. We were only told about the tumors. Okay, so, but they make these 5 golden mice, and it's kind of debated as to why they did that, and were there actually 5 or was there 10 or was there 5? The way I read it, there are 10 things here: 5 tumors, 5 mice. And they're sending these things off like, okay, we're going to appease God, and maybe he's going to turn his anger away from us. There could have been a thought here that, okay, we're going to send these tumors and these mice off, and as these images go out of our land, we're hoping that the tumors and mice will physically go out of our land as well. But we're going to try to appease God here. In chapter 5, verse 11, we know that there was death and destruction on the land of the Philistines. And so they're hoping maybe his hand will go off of us. But I like in chapter 5, or in verse 5, because at the end of chapter 4, what did the Israelites say? The glory of God has departed. And in chapter 6, verse 5, give glory to the God of Israel. So the Israelites are saying the glory has departed, and yet he's in a pagan land of the Philistines, and they're saying we are going to give glory to the God of Israel by sending these things back to him. So he's going to get glory whether the Israelites give it to him or not. He's going to get it from the Philistines, whether we glorify the Lord or not. He is going to be glorified. And so the Philistines seems like they have a fear of God. They have a knowledge of his power and of his judgment. But their issue is they're not turning to God. They're not asking for forgiveness. They're not turning and worshiping him. Instead, they're trying to get rid of him. It's like, okay, God, you're more powerful than the gods we have, but we don't want you here. Go away, and we'll continue to worship the gods we've always worshiped. And when it says rats are destroying our country, it seems like maybe the rats are eating their crops, which would be interesting because Dagon, their primary god, was a god that was supposed to bring an abundance of crops. So even God has brought their God to his knees, literally face down before him. And now he's also saying, you believe in your God to bring you an abundance of crops. Well, here's one better. I'm still more powerful than your God, and I'm going to send a plague and mice on you to show you that I'm more powerful than the God that you worship. And in verse 6, it says, why would you harden your hearts as the Egyptians did and Pharaoh did? If you remember back when God would send something against the Egyptians and Pharaoh would originally go, okay, you can leave. And then his heart would harden and he would take it back, say, no, you can't leave. And he would make it even harder on the Israelites. And they did that over and over and over again. And finally, when God brought death to the firstborn, then he sends them out. The priests and diviners of the Philistines might have been thinking, we don't want it to come to that. So don't harden your hearts. Let the ark go back before he really brings judgment down and takes our firstborn. But why is it important not to harden your hearts? I want to read a couple other passages here. Let's read Psalm 95. And as we're reading Psalm 95, I just want you to listen for the attributes of God that it's going to call out here that are pointing to the majesty, the holiness, the greatness of God. And then it's going to get to a point that says, do not harden your heart. So Psalm 95, oh come, let us sing to the Lord. Let us make a joyful noise to the rock of our salvation. Let us come into his presence with thanksgiving. Let us make a joyful noise to him with a song of praise. For the Lord is a great God and a great King above all gods. In his hand are the depths of the earth. The heights of the mountains are his also. The sea is his, for he made it, and his hands formed the dry land. O come, let us worship and bow down. Let us kneel before the Lord our Maker. For he is our God, and we are the people of his pasture and the sheep of his hand. Today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts as at Meribah, as on the day at Massah in the wilderness, when your fathers put me to the test and put me to the proof, though they had seen my work. For 40 years I loathed that generation and said, they are a people who go astray in their heart, and they have not known my ways. Therefore I swore in my wrath, they shall not enter my rest. Verse 8, do not harden your hearts as at Meribah, or at the day of Massah. What is he saying here? He's going back to when the Israelites were wandering. He's referring to two passages, Exodus 17 and Numbers 20. Meribah means quarreling. The Israelites were quarreling with Moses, and then they were quarreling with God. Massa means testing. They were putting God to the test. And he's saying their hearts were hardened. He had provided for the Israelites. He had taken them out of the land of Egypt. He had given them what they needed. And yet when it came time for them to trust again, they immediately hardened their hearts and started to question God. And they were saying, why did you bring us out here to die? It would have been better for us to just live in Egypt as slaves. I'll read a short part of Numbers 20 from this passage when it says, do not harden your hearts. Numbers 20, verse 10. So the Israelites have come and they're asking for water, and they're mad at Moses, and they're putting God to the test. And it says, then Moses and Aaron gathered the assembly together before the rock, and he said to them, hear now, you rebels, shall we bring water for you out of this rock? And Moses lifted up his hand and struck the rock with his staff twice, and water came out abundantly, and the congregation drank, and their livestock. Now here's the problem. Moses wasn't told to strike the rock. The first time he did strike the rock. This time God said, speak to the rock. Verse 12, and the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, because you did not believe in me to uphold me as holy in the eyes of the people of Israel, therefore you shall not bring this assembly into the land that I have given them. These are the waters of Meribah, where the people of Israel quarreled with the Lord, and through them he showed himself holy. What was the issue here? Was the issue here that Moses got mad and struck the rock when he was just supposed to speak to it? What's the issue with hardening our hearts against the Lord? It's that we serve a holy God. And it says that by doing that, by disobeying, Moses failed to uphold God as holy. And the same thing, our lives are to uphold God as holy. He is holy, and he will be seen as holy. He will be glorified. And it's supposed to be like part of the ways that's done is through our lives. And we're to uphold him through our obedience as holy. We're to regard him in that manner, that he is not something that's common, right? We're not to harden our heart against him. We're to serve him and obey him and honor God as holy. And so the Philistines even understood this. God has brought his hand against you. Don't harden your hearts. Don't double down against the Lord. So they come up with this plan. They include these details. And so when I was first reading through this, I thought, why are they including these details? Like, why are these important? They're not just here as fluff. These things are important. And in verse 7, it says, a new cart, 2 milk cows on which there has never come a yoke, and yoke the cows to the cart, but take their calves home away from them. Okay, so they're about 10 miles from the closest city of the Israelites. And they're taking these 2 cows that have never been yoked. Why is that important? Because 2 cows that have never been yoked, that have never been trained, are not going to pull a cart. They're going to resist the yoke. And they're definitely not going to pull a cart well together. They're going to try to pull in different directions. And then these cows have a calf. What's their instinct? Their instinct is to go to their calf. And so it says they take their calf home away from them. Those cows are not going to pull a cart towards Israel. They're going to pull the cart towards their calves. That's their motherly instinct. And so these details are included for a reason. Why? Because who's in control? God is in control here. Okay? And he's going to use these circumstances to get even more glory for himself. It would have been totally different if they'd have put 2 cows in here that had been yoked, that had pulled a cart together, and maybe had traveled to that city at some point for some reason. That's not the case. They try to stack the odds against God. And they're saying, okay, if they're going to pull it to this city without any direction, without any guidance, we're going to know it was God's hand against this, that this wasn't just chance. And so what's God going to do? He's going to get the glory. He's not going to let them think that this judgment was by chance. No, he's going to let them know that it was him. And he is going to intervene here and return the ark to Israel, to where it belongs, so his people can worship him. And so they go against their natural instinct without being guided. And God is going to answer this test very plainly for the Philistines. And he's even going to give them some grace because they don't handle the ark appropriately. The ark should have been covered. It should have never been touched. And it shouldn't have been on a cart. It was supposed to be carried. They were supposed to take the poles, put it through the handles in the ark, and that's how they were to carry it. They weren't to touch it. It didn't have handles where you could grab it with your hands. It was meant to be carried by the poles. And even in Numbers chapter 4, verses 14 to 15, he lines this out, how they're to do it. They're to cover it, and they are to carry it by the poles. And it says in Numbers 4, they must not touch the holy things or they will die. He's talking about the Israelite priests. That's how serious he is. Why? Because it was holy. It's not that God got mad and just decided he would kill them if they didn't obey. It's that they weren't regarding him as holy. They weren't treating him as holy, as set apart like they should. And so why does he give them grace? Why does he give the Philistines grace? He could have killed them all. And they don't carry the ark. One, they were ignorant. They didn't have the law that that God had given the Israelites. So they were ignorant. They also didn't have any Levites to carry the ark. And God gives them grace in order to work out his plan that he will be glorified and the ark will go back to Israel. And it's his sovereignty here that carries the ark back. He doesn't leave it up to chance. And let's read verses 10 through 18. The men did so and took 2 milk cows and yoked them to the cart and shut up their calves at home. And they put the ark of the Lord on the cart and the box with the golden mice and the images of their tumors. And the cows went straight in the direction of Beth-Shemesh along one highway, lowing as they went. They turned neither to the right nor to the left. And the lords of the Philistines went after them as far as the border of Beth-Shemesh. Now the people of Beth-Shemesh were reaping their wheat harvest in the valley. And when they lifted up their eyes and saw the ark, they rejoiced to see it. The cart came into the field of Joshua of Beth-Shemesh and stopped there. A great stone was there. And they split up the wood of the cart and offered the cows as a burnt offering to the Lord. And the Levites took down the ark of the Lord and the box that was beside it, in which the golden figures, and set them upon the great stone. And the men of Beth-Shemesh offered burnt offerings and sacrificed sacrifices on that day to the Lord. And when the 5 lords of the Philistines saw it, they returned that day to Ekron. These are the golden tumors that the Philistines returned as a guilt offering to the Lord, one for Ashdod, one for Gaza, one for Ashkelon, one for Gath, one for Ekron. And the golden mice, according to the number of all the cities of the Philistines belonging to the 5 lords, both fortified cities and unwalled villages. The great stone beside which they set down the ark of the Lord is a witness to this day in the field of Joshua of Beth-Shemesh. So they put the plan to action, and they put the carts on, and it says that these cows who shouldn't have pulled the cart, shouldn't have pulled it together, went straight to the city in Israel. And it's about 10 miles, so I find it interesting that the Philistines originally didn't take the ark to this city. They had taken it around and passed it around, and as they did, they didn't know it, but what are they doing? They're taking it closer and closer to where the ark is going to leave from to be returned to not just the city in Israel, a priestly city that would have Levites on hand to handle the ark. That's important. The common men in Israel could not handle the ark. It had to be Levites, and there's Levites in this city. So the cows go straight there. It says they're lowing as they went. And so I asked Dr. Bob, I'm not a cow person. I said, Dr. Bob, what does that mean? They're lowing as they went. And he said, well, one, it could be that they were excited. So he said whenever he pulls up and his cows see him, they start mooing and they're excited and they're kind of passing a message along. Or it could be that they were calling their calves that had been shut up at home. And so it's almost as if maybe they were under some duress here, that they're calling their calves who are in the opposite direction of where they're going. But what are they going to do? They're going to do the will of the Lord. And they're going to take the ark to where it needs to go. And it says they don't turn to the right or to the left. They go straight. And when they get there, it's the wheat harvest. So the Israelites who believe the glory of the Lord has departed are harvesting wheat. So this is probably May or June time frame. Why are they harvesting wheat? Because God has continued to provide for them. He's continued to give them his mercy and his grace and pour out his goodness on them, even whenever they think his glory has departed. And so they're out there harvesting wheat, and I start to think, what are their minds on? It's been 7 months since the ark's been taken, 7 months since their high priest died. His sons were killed in battle. 30,000+ of their soldiers were killed in battle. What do you think is on their mind? Some of them are probably out there just cutting wheat, not really much on their mind. Some of them are probably out there in despair still, going, God, what are we supposed to do? Where's the ark? Is the ark ever going to come back? Some may be thinking about, man, should we just leave the faith? Should we just go worship these other gods? Some of them are probably thinking, God, bring the ark back. Return to us your glory. Some of them are probably having a conversation like that in their head with God, man, what is going on, God? I would love to understand what you're doing here. And then all of a sudden, 2 cows, not guided, come pulling up, and they stop at this field, and there's the ark. And they start to celebrate. They start to rejoice. And it names the guy whose field they stop in, Joshua. And I thought, well, who is this? Is he important? And in my research, I didn't find much on him. But what did we talk about? God's sovereignty, God's providence, that he moves people, place, and time to accomplish his will. So we have a certain man at a particular place at a strategic time that for whatever reason owned this field that just so happened to have a large stone in it that they could use as an altar to sacrifice to the Lord. And then I thought, they probably complained about that stone at some point. If this stone wasn't here, I'd have more crops. We have to maneuver around whenever we're sowing the seed or whenever we're harvesting. It's just in the way. What do they think about that? Why was that stone there? Who put it there? We don't know how it got there, but we know that God had it there for a reason. Something as simple as a large stone in a field, God is going to use for his glory, that they would be able to use it as an altar as this miracle of the cows bringing the ark back plays out. And it says they rejoice whenever they see this. And they go and they take these cows. And as Dr. Bob put out, it's very sad that these cows did the will of the Lord and then get slaughtered. Okay? But that was their role. They take down the ark. So the Levites who are in this town take down the ark and the golden figures, and then they're going to make a sacrifice. And God gives grace here because they didn't follow the law when making this sacrifice. They offered female animals. In Leviticus, it says you are to bring a male. So they offer female animals. They were also supposed to offer it at the tabernacle. Well, the tabernacle wasn't there, but they did have something they could use. So why did God give them grace here? Because he knows their hearts. He knows their circumstances, and he was honored in their sacrifice. He was brought glory through their sacrifice. Leviticus 2:15 says that it's a pleasing aroma to the Lord. And whenever they come and they see the ark and they're celebrating, God's glory is back, his presence is back, and they're excited and they sacrifice the Lord. He has a pleasing aroma from the sacrifice. Psalm 51:15-17 says, he is looking for broken and contrite hearts that will honor him, that will glorify him, that will worship him. And that's what the Israelites are doing here in their excitement to be able to make a sacrifice to the Lord. And so he honors them. And he set up all of this beforehand. right? Everything is working according to his plan. So they take this large stone, and it says that it becomes a memorial for the Israelites for what God did on that day. And this is like a side note. This isn't the main takeaway from the passage, but we do need to take time to remember what God has done. This stone is a memorial that, hey, do you remember those 7 dark months when we believed that the glory of the Lord had departed from us, when the ark was gone, when we didn't know what we were going to do and we're questioning God? Do you remember those months? And then do you remember when God brought the ark back? Do you remember when during those dark months he was being glorified over in the land of the Philistines, that he was pouring out his judgment on them? And then he provided everything we needed here that we could worship the Lord again. Sometimes we need to take time and make sure we remember what God has done. And then let's read verse 19 through the end of the chapter. And it ends in a not so great way, this chapter. They go from excitement, rejoicing, the ark is back, they sacrifice to the Lord, and then we get to verse 19. And he struck some of the men of Beth-Shemesh because they looked upon the ark of the Lord. He struck 70 men of them, and the people mourned because the Lord had struck the people with a great blow. Then the men of Beth-Shemesh said, "Who is able to stand before the Lord, this holy God? And to whom shall he go up away from us?" So they sent messengers to the inhabitants of Kiriath-Jearim, saying, "The Philistines have returned the ark of the Lord. Come down and take it up to you." So this is an interesting passage. Why did he strike them down? Okay? Why did he do that? Because they looked upon the ark of the Lord. Like, why is that a big deal? Because God is a holy God. And the ark was supposed to be covered, and you weren't supposed to look at it. The only person that was to see it was the high priest when he went in on the Day of Atonement. And so he does hold them accountable. Why would they look upon the ark? And the translation reads as if they looked in the ark. Why would they do that? Why? And I thought, so they didn't follow some specific guidelines that they shouldn't touch the ark. Common people weren't to look on the ark. It should have been the Levites doing this. And then I thought, why would they be so curious as to look in the ark? The Philistines were smart enough. When they make these golden tumors and golden mice, they set it beside the ark. They didn't look inside of it. They had a reverence, a fear of God. Why did the Israelites not do it? And I thought maybe they had good intentions. Maybe they thought, oh, do you think the Philistines took the stuff that's supposed to be in the ark? Maybe we should check. It's like, okay, who's in control here? Side thought here. I thought, there's a lot of arguments, and people say, well, there's certain books of the Bible that should be in here that we don't have because of whatever happened, or this is wrong. And I thought, well, who's in control of that? God's in control of it. He was in control of the ark. He's not going to let the Philistines take stuff out that they're not supposed to. He would have struck them dead. And so they have these good intentions, maybe, or maybe they're just curious, and they look into the ark and God strikes them dead. Why does he hold them to that high of an accountability? The Israelites had the law. The Israelites were God's chosen people. They had a greater knowledge of who he is and his will. And so because they had a greater knowledge, they're held to a greater responsibility. You know my law, you should obey it. You know my will, you should follow it. And he holds them accountable for that. And they didn't treat the ark as holy. It's not something where God got angry and decided to strike him down. No, they didn't treat him as holy. They didn't hold him in reverence. And some translations say that he killed 70 men. Your translation may read 50,070. So there's a difference in translation. The Hebrew can be taken as 70, or it can be taken, some say it can be taken as 70 out of 50,000. And in translation, some translations will say 50,070. So I started reading, what's all the debate in this? It's different translations. Okay? So in my research, I read it as 70. Is there a big deal here if some translations say 50,070? What's the point? What's the point of it? The point is God is going to be honored, and he takes his honor seriously. And so what your translation says, 70 or 50,070, he takes his honor seriously, and he's willing to strike some men down for not honoring him. They offended the holiness of God with their disrespect for the ark. He is set apart from his creation. He is to be regarded as holy. We are to honor him, not treat him as common. He is high and lifted up. And we are to take that seriously. In Revelation 4, there are creatures in heaven who day and night never cease to honor the holiness of God. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty, who was and is to come. And they repeat that over and over and over again, day and night, without ceasing. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty. We are to take God's holiness with a seriousness. But there are also, as a believer, we're told in 1 Peter chapter 1, let's read verse 15 and 16. But as he who called you is holy, you also be holy in all your conduct, since it is written, you shall be holy, for I am holy. So we're supposed to take the holiness of God with a seriousness, and then it says, you live up to that standard. You be holy. And I think, well, I'm not holy. I might be in trouble, like I might be deserving of what those 70 men got. 1 Peter chapter 2 says, you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for his own possession, that you may proclaim the excellencies of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. How am I supposed to live up to this, to a holy God, to his standards? The answer is I cannot. I cannot in and of myself honor God as holy, as hard as I may try. So what's the good news for us? Remember, the ark was important. On the Day of Atonement, the high priest would go in, and on the top of the ark was the mercy seat. And what would that priest do? He would take the blood of the animal and he would sprinkle it on the mercy seat so that when God looked down, he would see the blood, and his justice, his judgment would be atoned for the people of Israel. The bad news for them is they had to do it over and over and over again. The good news for us is that the blood of Christ covers us, that we are seen as holy because of that. So when God looks at us, he doesn't see us in our filth and in our sin. He sees us as covered in the blood, and his justice, his judgment is atoned for, not only atoned for, but redeemed. Right? Because we're covered in the blood and we can be seen as holy. He takes his holiness and gives it to us. He gives us his righteousness so that we are seen in that light. So when we are justified, that's what it means. We are justified before a holy God, that when he looks at us, he sees us as holy, as righteous, not because of anything we've done, but because of the blood of his Son. Just as the ark was important for the Israelites, we are covered in the blood of the Lamb who came to take away the sins of the world. And so we are to take God as holy and with a seriousness, but knowing that as a believer, that's how he sees us, as holy and righteous. And one day we'll stand before him justified, holy and righteous because of what Christ did for us. Let's pray. God, thank you for tonight. God, thank you for how you are in control of everything. God, you were in control when the Israelites thought the glory had departed. God, you're in control when the ark was in the land of the Philistines. God, you're in control of our lives when we feel like the glory has departed. God, you're in control when things are good, when they're hard. God, when it's just common. God, when we're in the field like the Israelites, just another day of the wheat harvest. God, thank you for your goodness. God, never let us fail to see your goodness in our lives, God. Always redirect our eyes to you. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.